The sky broke first over the Pacific Ocean. At 3:47 a.m., a bright line of light cut across the dark sky, like someone had torn a hole in the night. Fishermen on small boats stopped and stared, their nets forgotten in their hands. The light did not fade. It grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Within seconds, satellites around the Earth went dark, one by one. Radio signals turned to static. Television screens across every country flickered and died. For 12 long seconds, the whole world lost its voice. Then the sky opened. A massive fleet of ships appeared above the Earth, so large that people on the ground could see them without telescopes. They looked like black mountains floating in space, their surfaces covered with strange blue lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. There were hundreds of them, some said thousands, no one could count fast enough. In New York, people ran into the streets in their pajamas, phones raised to the sky. In Tokyo, subway trains stopped between stations, passengers pressed against windows. In Lagos, mothers pulled their children close and looked up. In every city, on every continent, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the same time. For 6,000 years, humans had asked the same question, again and again. Are we alone in the universe? Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. News anchors tried to explain what was happening, but their voices shook. Governments issued emergency statements, but no one had real answers. Militaries around the world moved to full alert. Fighter jets took off from bases in every country, though everyone knew, deep down, that their weapons were like toys compared to what floated above them. But something strange was happening too. Instead of panic, some people felt something else. A strange calm, an old memory buried deep inside them, as if their bodies remembered something their minds could not. 200 meters below the Rocky Mountains, in a base that did not appear on any public map, alarms rang through steel hallways. Soldiers ran past each other shouting orders. Red lights spun on the ceiling. General Elena Cross walked fast through the chaos, her face calm but her eyes sharp. She had trained for many emergencies in her 30 years of service, but not this one. No one had trained for this one, because until today, everyone believed this day was only a legend. She reached a heavy steel door at the end of a long hallway, a door that had not been opened in over 80 years. "Open it," she said to the guard standing beside it. The guard hesitated. "General, this door only opens under Protocol 0. "This is Protocol 0, Elena said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Look at the sky. Look at what is happening right now. If this is not the day, then nothing ever will be." The guard's hands trembled as he entered the code. The door hissed and slid open, revealing a small room with one table, one chair, and one metal box sitting under a thick layer of dust. Elena stepped inside alone. She wiped the dust from the box with her sleeve. Her fingers found the old lock. She had been given the combination on her very first day as a general, told to remember it, but never told why. She had always assumed it was some old, forgotten training exercise. She had been wrong. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a single file, yellow and brittle with age. The words on the cover were faded, but still readable. Project Echo, classified, to be opened only when they return. Elena's hands were steady, but her heart was pounding. She opened the file and began to read. The file told a story that no history book had ever recorded. 6,000 years ago, before the pyramids were built, before writing existed, before any nation had a name, the Earth was visited once before. The same beings who now floated above the planet had come the first time with fire and destruction. They believed humans were weak, primitive, easy to conquer. They landed their ships and expected no resistance. They were wrong. Humanity had no advanced weapons back then, no powerful machines, no shields or lasers. What they had was something the invaders did not expect: unity, courage, and a refusal to break, no matter how hard they were pushed. Whole villages worked together. Strangers protected each other's children. People who had never met before stood shoulder to shoulder in the face of impossible odds. The invaders had conquered other worlds by breaking their enemies apart, turning them against each other. But humans did the opposite. The harder they were pressed, the closer they stood together. In the end, the invaders retreated, defeated not by superior technology but by something they did not understand and could not fight against. Before they left, they made a vow, written in their own ancient language and somehow left behind for future generations to translate. They would return one day, stronger, wiser, and ready to finish what they started. Since that day, small groups of humans hidden in every generation and every civilization had prepared for this exact moment, passing down the knowledge in secret, generation after generation. Waiting. Elena closed the file slowly. Humanity had not been caught by surprise today. Humanity had been waiting for 6,000 years. Back in orbit, the alien fleet's largest ship opened a channel to every radio, television, and phone on Earth at the same time. A deep voice spoke, cold and full of ancient anger. "People of Earth," the voice said. 6,000 years ago, our ancestors came to this world and were shamed. We have returned to finish what was started. Surrender now, or face complete destruction. You cannot resist us. You cannot hide. This is a declaration of war. The message repeated in every language on Earth, in command centers around the world. Leaders waited for the expected response. Panic, surrender, desperate pleas for mercy. That is not what happened. In Washington, the president did not call for evacuation. Instead, she picked up a phone and gave a very different order. In Beijing, the premier smiled, a small, knowing smile, and told his advisors to prepare the old plans, the ones passed down secretly through generations of leadership. In small villages across Africa, in temples across Asia, in old churches across Europe, elders who had kept ancient secrets for their entire lives finally stood up and told their families, "It is time." Within hours, something incredible began to happen across the Earth. Instead of bunkers, people opened their doors. Instead of weapons, people prepared food. Instead of fear, cities began to light up with color. In town squares, workers set up long tables, musicians tuned their instruments, farmers brought their best crops, bakeries filled the streets with the smell of fresh bread. It looked, impossibly, like the entire planet was preparing for a party. The alien commander aboard the lead ship watched all of this through his monitors. His name was Kale Vex Doran, commander of the Thraxian invasion fleet, a warrior who had conquered 11 worlds without losing a single battle. He had studied Earth's old records, the shameful defeat of his ancestors, and had trained his entire life for this moment of revenge. He expected chaos. He expected humans running in terror. He expected cities burning with panic as people fled from his fleet's shadow. Instead, his monitors showed humans setting up tables of food in the streets, children painting welcome signs, musicians playing instruments in the town squares, bright lights strung between buildings like decorations for a festival. Kyle stared at the screens, his four eyes narrowing in confusion. "Send the translation again," he ordered his communications officer. Perhaps they did not understand. "Commander," the officer said carefully. "Every translation matrix confirms they understood. This is their reply." On the largest screen, a new message appeared, sent from Earth back to the fleet. It was not a message of surrender. It was not a message of defiance either. It was an invitation. "Welcome back," the message read. "We have been waiting 6,000 years to properly meet you. Come down, we have prepared a feast. Let us talk before anything else happens." Kale's hands tightened on the arms of his command chair. This was not what his ancestors had described. This was not the weak, primitive species from 6,000 years ago. These humans knew exactly who was arriving, and instead of fear, they had chosen something far more dangerous, something Kale had never faced in any of his 11 conquests. They had chosen kindness. And for the first time in his long military career, Commander Kale Vex Doran felt something he had never felt before in battle. He felt afraid. 6,000 years ago, the world looked nothing like it does today. There were no cities of glass and steel, no roads stretching across continents, no lights that could be seen from space. The Earth was young in the eyes of civilization. Small settlements dotted the land, connected only by dirt paths and rivers. People lived in tribes and villages and small kingdoms just beginning to form. They knew nothing of writing, nothing of metal weapons stronger than bronze, nothing of the stars beyond the ones they saw twinkling above their fires at night. It was into this world that the Thraxians first came. Their ships arrived without warning, tearing through the sky above the plains of what would one day be called Mesopotamia. The people who saw them fall to their knees, believing the gods themselves were descending from the heavens. They did not know these were not gods, they were conquerors, and they had crossed the stars looking for a new world to claim. The Thraxian commander of that first invasion was named Voran Kesh, an ancestor of the very fleet now orbiting Earth in the present day. Voran had already conquered 7 worlds before finding Earth. 7 civilizations had fallen beneath his ships, some with great armies, some with powerful weapons. All of them had bowed to the Thraxian Empire eventually. It was only a matter of time and pressure. Voran expected the same here. His scouts reported back quickly. Primitive weapons, no organized armies, no unity between tribes. Some tribes even fought each other over land and water. This world, Voran believed, would fall in days, perhaps hours. He landed his forces near the largest settlement his scouts could find, a village of nearly 2,000 people living along a wide river. He expected fear. He expected surrender. What he found instead confused him from the very first day. The village elder was a woman named Sarah, though history would later lose her true name in the passing of thousands of years, only remembering her through old stories and legends. Sarah was not a warrior. She had never held a weapon in her life. She was known in her village for one thing only. She never gave up no matter what problem faced her people: drought, flood, sickness, or attack from rival tribes. When the Thraxian ships landed and their soldiers marched toward her village, Sarah did not run. She did not hide her people in the hills. Instead, she walked out to meet them, alone, her hands empty and open. Voran watched this through his ship's monitors, amused. "She comes to surrender already," he said to his officers. "This will be easier than I thought." He was wrong. Sarah did not kneel. She did not bow her head. She stood before the Thraxian soldiers, small and completely unarmed, and spoke words they could not yet understand. But her tone was clear. She was not afraid. She was not asking for mercy. She was asking them to leave. The soldiers laughed. One raised his weapon to strike her down as an example to the rest of the village. But before the weapon could fall, something happened that Voran had never seen in any of his 7 previous conquests. The entire village rose up behind her. Not with weapons, not with organized battle lines, just people. Farmers holding tools, elders too old to run, children hiding behind their parents' legs, all of them standing together, refusing to move, refusing to scatter in fear. When one soldier grabbed an old man, 3 villagers pulled him back. When another soldier struck a young boy, 5 more villagers surrounded him, not to fight, but simply to place their bodies between the soldier and the child. It was not warfare. It was something the Thraxians had no name for. Voran ordered more soldiers down. Believing more force would break this strange resistance, it did not. Village after village, tribe after tribe. The same pattern repeated. Humans who had never met each other, who spoke different languages, who sometimes had been enemies just days before, began working together the moment the Thraxian ships appeared. Word spread across the land faster than Voran's forces could travel. Messengers ran between villages carrying warnings. Rival tribes put aside old conflicts. Kingdoms that had never spoken to each other before sent envoys, asking to combine their strength. By the time Voran's forces reached the 3rd region, they were no longer facing scattered villages. They were facing thousands of humans, united, standing shoulder to shoulder. Voran's advisors grew nervous. In every other world they had conquered, fear had been their greatest weapon. Fear made enemies turn on each other. Fear made leaders betray their own people to save themselves. Fear was what always broke resistance apart, but these humans did not break. The more danger they faced, the closer together they stood. "This makes no sense," one Thraxian officer said, staring at reports from the battlefield. "They have no advanced weapons, no shields, no armor stronger than leather and bronze. Why do our soldiers keep failing to hold ground?" Voran did not have an answer. Not yet. The turning point came at the Battle of the Wide River, the very place where Sarah's village stood. Voran gathered his largest force yet, determined to crush this strange resistance once and for all. He believed if he destroyed the village where this had all begun, the rest of humanity's strange unity would collapse with it. He was wrong again. When his ships descended toward the river village, they found something waiting that no scout had reported. Thousands of humans, not just from Sarah's village, but from every settlement within 100 miles, standing together on the riverbank. They had no army in the way Varan understood armies, no ranks, no uniforms, no single powerful weapon. What they had was numbers, unity, and something burning in their eyes that Varan's translators struggled to describe in any Thraxian word. The closest word his scholars could find centuries later, translated roughly as hope. The battle that followed was long and difficult. Thraxian weapons were far superior, and many humans fell that day. But for every human who fell, 10 more stepped forward to take their place. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like people protecting their homes, their children, their future. There was no fear of death in their eyes, only determination. Varan's soldiers trained for conquest, not for a battle against an enemy who refused to feel fear, began to falter. Some Thraxian soldiers reported strange feelings during the battle, an unease they could not explain, watching an enemy who should have been terrified instead standing firm, calm and united even as their friends fell beside them. By the end of the day, Varan's forces had taken the village, but it cost him more than any battle in his 7 previous conquests combined, and more importantly, it changed nothing. The humans did not surrender. They regrouped. They rebuilt. They kept coming. Weeks turned into months. Varan's campaign, which was supposed to take days, dragged on and on. His supply lines grew thin. His soldiers grew tired, not from lack of strength, but from something deeper. A growing unease about an enemy that refused to break no matter what was thrown at them. Reports began reaching Varan of strange events. Thraxian soldiers, stationed in captured villages to maintain control, began to change. Some started sharing food with the very villagers they were meant to be guarding. One soldier was found teaching a group of human children simple words from the Thraxian language, laughing as they mispronounced the sounds. When officers tried to discipline these soldiers, other soldiers protected them, echoing, without realizing it, the very same unity the humans had shown from the beginning. Varan realized too late what was happening. His own soldiers were being changed by the very species he had come to conquer. He called an emergency meeting of his highest officers deep inside his flagship. "We are losing," he admitted. The first time in his career he had spoken those words aloud. "Not because they are stronger, not because they have better weapons. We are losing because they do not fight like every other world we have taken. They fight for each other, and that is spreading to our own soldiers." One young officer, barely more than a boy in Thraxian years, spoke quietly. "Commander, perhaps we should learn from them instead of destroying them." Varan struck the boy across the face for such a suggestion. But that night, alone in his chambers, he could not stop thinking about those words. The final battle came at what humans would later call the Great Stand. Though the name of the actual location was lost to time, Varan gathered every remaining soldier and ship for one final assault, determined to crush the resistance completely, no matter the cost. But when his forces arrived, they found something even more surprising than before. Word of the humans' unity had spread so far and wide that tribes from distant lands, who had never even heard of Sarah's village, who had no reason to help strangers so far away, arrived to stand alongside them anyway. Varan stood on the deck of his flagship, watching an endless sea of humans stretching across the horizon, united not by force, not by fear, but by something they carried inside themselves. He realized in that moment that he could destroy every village, burn every field, kill every warrior standing before him, and it would not matter. More would come. Because this was not a war against an army. This was a war against an idea, and ideas cannot be killed with weapons. He gave the order to retreat. His officers were stunned. No Thraxian commander had ever retreated in the history of the Empire's conquests. But Varan understood something his officers did not yet grasp. Some victories cost more than defeat. Before leaving Earth's orbit for the final time, Varan did something unusual. He recorded a message not for the humans below, but for his own descendants, a warning and a promise carved into ancient Thraxian data crystals that would be preserved for thousands of years. "We came to this world believing it would be easy," he said, staring into the recording device, his voice heavy. "We were wrong. The humans of this world do not fight like any species we have encountered before. They cannot be broken through fear, because they do not stand alone. Even our own soldiers began to change in their presence. We are leaving now, not because we cannot destroy them, but because destroying them would cost us more than we can afford to lose. One day, our empire will return, stronger, wiser, prepared for what we did not understand this time. When that day comes, do not repeat my mistakes. Do not underestimate them. Do not let your soldiers grow close to them. Strike swiftly, before their unity can spread." The message was locked away in the deepest archives of the Thraxian Empire, passed down through generations of commanders, a shameful secret rarely spoken aloud. Most Thraxians alive today did not even know it existed, except for one, back in the present, aboard the fleet now orbiting Earth. Commander Kale Vex Doran sat alone in his private chambers, staring at an old data crystal his grandfather had given him in secret, years before his death. A crystal Kale had been forbidden to share with anyone in the Empire. Voran Kesh's ancient warning played once more on his screen. Kale had grown up believing his ancestors' retreat 6,000 years ago was a strategic delay, a temporary setback before total victory. He had trained his entire life to finish what Voran had started. He had studied Earth's weapons, Earth's technology, Earth's military strength, all of it far more advanced now than 6,000 years ago. But watching Voran's recorded message again, watching the fear in his ancestors' eyes as he spoke of an enemy who could not be broken through weapons alone, Kale felt a cold unease creeping into his chest. And now watching his monitors show humans setting up tables of food instead of weapons, decorating their cities instead of hiding in bunkers, sending messages of welcome instead of surrender, Kale understood something his own officers did not yet see. This was not confusion, this was not weakness. This was exactly what Voran had warned about 6,000 years ago. The humans were doing it again. "Commander," his communications officer said, stepping carefully into his private chambers. "The Earth government has sent a formal invitation. They are requesting a small delegation land at a location called Washington. They say a feast has been prepared. They wish to speak before any further action is taken." Kyle did not answer immediately. His mind raced between his grandfather's warning and his own empire's orders. He had been sent here with clear instructions: conquer Earth, avenge his ancestors' humiliating retreat, restore the Thraxian Empire's honor. But something in Voran's ancient words echoed inside him now, a warning passed down through 6,000 years. Do not let your soldiers grow close to them. Strike swiftly, before their unity can spread. If he sent a delegation down to that feast, would his own soldiers begin to change, the way Voran's soldiers had changed 6,000 years ago? And yet, if he refused the invitation and attacked without understanding his enemy first, would he simply repeat the same mistake his ancestor had made, walking blindly into a battle he did not understand? Kale closed his fist around the data crystal, his decision heavy on his shoulders. "Prepare a landing party," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I will go myself. I need to see this enemy with my own eyes before I decide anything." His officer hesitated. "Commander, is that wise? If the ancient warning is true." "That is exactly why I must go," Kale interrupted. "My ancestor ran from something he did not understand. I will not make the same mistake. I will understand them first, then I will decide how they fall." He stood straightening his uniform, his mind set. But deep inside, a small quiet doubt had already taken root, a doubt his own ancestor had planted for him 6,000 years ago, without ever knowing it. What if understanding them was exactly how the humans would win this war, without ever raising a single weapon? The shuttle-carrying commander Kale Vex Doran broke through Earth's atmosphere just after sunset. Below him, the lights of Washington spread out like a carpet of stars fallen to the ground. Kale had seen many worlds from orbit, some beautiful, some barren, but none had prepared him for this sight. A civilization glowing with light in every direction, endless and alive. Beside him sat three of his most trusted officers, chosen carefully for this mission. Lyra Vex Sorn, his second in command, sharp-eyed and always suspicious of danger. Tarn K. Vallis, a young officer barely out of training, eager to prove himself, and Doran Ash Kellum, an older soldier who had served under Kale's father and carried decades of battle experience. "Remember," Kale said as the shuttle descended, "we are not here to trust them. We are here to understand them. Nothing more." Lyra nodded firmly. "Understood, Commander." Tarn said nothing, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. He had never set foot on an alien world before, especially not one his people had been trained since childhood to see as an ancient enemy. The shuttle landed in an open field just outside the city, and what greeted them stole the breath from every soldier aboard. Long tables stretched across the grass, covered in food of every color and smell, bread still warm from ovens, fruits Kale had never seen before, dishes that steamed gently in the cool evening air. String lights hung between wooden poles, casting a soft golden glow over everything. Musicians stood to one side, playing instruments that made sounds unlike anything in Thraxian music, gentle, warm, almost like laughter turned into melody. And standing at the center of it all, waiting calmly, was a woman in a simple dark suit, flanked by a small group of advisors. She did not look afraid. She did not look like someone expecting an attack. She looked like someone welcoming old friends home. "Commander Kale Vex Doran," the woman said as the shuttle door opened, her voice steady. "My name is President Amara Voss. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Please come, sit. You must be tired after such a long journey." Kale stepped down from the shuttle slowly, his hand resting near his weapon out of habit, though he did not draw it. "You knew my name before I gave it. We have studied your language for centuries," Amara said simply. "Preparing for this day, please sit. Let us eat together before we speak of difficult things." Kale exchanged a glance with Lyra, who gave the smallest shake of her head, a silent warning. But Kale had come here to understand, not merely to observe from a distance. He walked forward and sat at the table. The meal that followed was unlike anything Kale had experienced in his military career. There were no demands, no threats, no attempts to negotiate surrender. Instead, Amara and her advisors asked questions, simple questions, about Kale's home, his family, the stars his people had traveled from. They listened closely to his answers, nodding, sometimes smiling, sometimes falling quiet with thought. Tarn, seated near the end of the table, found himself talking with a young human boy who had wandered over, curious about the strange visitor with 4 eyes. The boy asked simple questions. "What do you eat at home? Do you have brothers and sisters? What do the stars look like from your ship?" Tarn answered carefully at first, then found himself relaxing, even smiling as the boy laughed at his description of Thraxian moons. Doran, the older soldier, sat mostly silent, watching everything with careful eyes. He had seen many strange things in his long service, but nothing like this. An enemy who fed you before asking anything of you. Lyra alone remained tense throughout the meal, her eyes constantly scanning the crowd, searching for hidden weapons, for signs of a trap. She found none. Only ordinary people, farmers, musicians, children, elders, none of them armed, none of them hiding anything she could detect. "This is strange," she whispered to Kale during a quiet moment. "Where are their soldiers? Where is their defense?" "Perhaps this is their defense," Kale said quietly, watching Amara laugh gently at something one of his own officers had said. As the meal wound down, Amara finally leaned forward, her expression turning serious for the first time. "Commander, I imagine you have questions about why we welcomed you instead of fighting, about why an entire planet prepared a feast instead of an army." "I have many questions," Kale admitted. "Then let me answer the most important one," Amara said. 6,000 years ago, your people came to this world and found something they did not expect. We know this because we have kept the memory alive, passed down through countless generations waiting for this exact day. We knew you would return one day. We simply did not know when. So we prepared, not weapons, but this. She gestured to the tables, the lights, the gathered people. We prepared to show you something different than what your ancestors expected to find. Kale's grip on his cup tightened slightly. My ancestor left a warning. He said unity could not be defeated by force. He said your people cannot be broken through fear because you do not stand alone. Amara smiled, a small, knowing smile. Your ancestor understood something important, Commander. Kindness spreads the same way fear does, perhaps faster. We are not offering you a trick. We are offering you a choice. The same choice your ancestors' soldiers faced 6,000 years ago. And what choice is that? To remain what you have always been, Amara said gently, or to become something new. That night, back aboard the fleet, Kale reported everything to his officers. But something had already begun to shift. Something even Kale himself did not fully understand yet. Tarn could not stop thinking about the human boy he had spoken with, the boy's easy laughter, his simple curiosity without any trace of fear. In all his training, Tarn had been taught that humans were dangerous, primitive, but cunning, capable of great violence when threatened. But the boy had shown no violence, no cunning, only warmth. Doran, sitting alone in his private quarters, replayed the events of the feast again and again in his mind. He had fought in many campaigns, conquered many worlds, and always, fear had been present somewhere, in the eyes of the conquered, in the tension of negotiations. But tonight he had felt none of that, only an unusual calm he could not explain. Lyra alone remained troubled, but for different reasons. She reported to Kale privately, her voice sharp with concern. Commander, I do not trust this kindness. This complete cannot be genuine. There must be a deeper strategy. Perhaps they mean to weaken our resolve, make us hesitate before battle. We should strike now while we still can, before more of our soldiers begin to feel what Tarn and Doran are feeling. Kale considered her words carefully. She was not wrong to be cautious. His ancestors' warning echoed clearly. Strike swiftly, before unity can spread, before soldiers grow close to the enemy. But something held him back, a growing curiosity he could not fully explain. Give it more time, Kyle said finally. I need to understand them fully before we act. A commander who does not understand his enemy is a commander who repeats old mistakes. Lyra did not look satisfied, but she nodded and left without further argument. Over the following days, Kale allowed small groups of his soldiers to visit the surface under careful supervision, believing that greater understanding would only strengthen his final decision. He did not yet realize how quickly that decision was slipping away from him. In cities across the world, Thraxian soldiers walked among humans for the first time in 6,000 years. Some remained distant, watching everything with suspicion, following Lyra's cautious example. But many others began to change, slowly, quietly, the way a stone smooths over years beneath flowing water. In Tokyo, a group of Thraxian soldiers spent an evening with a family who invited them into their home for dinner. Despite having very little themselves, the soldiers left that night carrying small gifts, handmade items the family had given freely, expecting nothing in return. In Nairobi, Thraxian soldiers helped local farmers repair a broken water pump, not because they were ordered to, but because they saw people struggling, and something inside them, some old instinct buried deep, pushed them to help. In small towns across the world, similar stories repeated again and again. Soldiers trained for conquest slowly discovering something none of their training had prepared them for. The simple, quiet power of being treated with kindness by people who had every reason to fear them instead. Word of these changes spread quickly through the fleet, whispered between soldiers in private quarters. Some officers grew alarmed, others grew curious themselves, wondering what exactly the humans were doing to cause such a shift. Back on the flagship, High Command grew concerned. Word had reached the distant Thraxian homeworld of unusual reports from the Earth invasion fleet, soldiers behaving strangely, growing close to the enemy, hesitating in their duties. The Thraxian Emperor himself, a cold and calculating ruler named Zorath Keldraven, called for an immediate explanation. Kale was summoned to a private communication chamber aboard his flagship, where a holographic image of Emperor Zorath appeared before him, tall and imposing even through the projection, his four eyes narrow with displeasure. Commander Kale, the Emperor said, his voice cold. Explain to me why my soldiers are feasting with the enemy instead of preparing for battle. Explain why reports describe Thraxian warriors laughing alongside humans instead of conquering them. 6,000 years, Commander. 6,000 years my empire has waited to erase the shame your ancestor brought upon us. And you delay with dinners and conversations. Emperor, Kale said carefully, choosing his words. The situation here is more complex than initial reports suggested. The humans do not fight as expected. My ancestor's warning was clear. Unity cannot be broken through force. I believe understanding them fully will lead to a stronger, more complete victory than a rushed attack. The Emperor's eyes narrowed further. Or perhaps, Commander, you are becoming exactly what your ancestor feared, a soldier changed by the enemy he was sent to conquer. Kyle felt a cold chill at those words, but kept his expression steady. I remain loyal to the Empire, Emperor. I simply believe patience will serve us better than haste. You have 3 days, Zorath said finally, his tone final and absolute. 3 days to complete your understanding and begin the conquest as ordered. If you fail to act, Commander, I will send a fleet twice the size of yours, with a commander who will not hesitate. Do not disappoint me the way your ancestor disappointed this empire 6,000 years ago. The hologram vanished, leaving Kyle alone in the silent chamber, his mind heavy with the weight of an impossible choice. Word of the Emperor's ultimatum spread quickly among Kale's officers. Lyra received it with a grim sense of vindication. I warned you, Commander. We have delayed too long already. We must strike now, before the Emperor sends someone who will destroy everything, including any chance of understanding these humans peacefully. But Tarn, upon hearing the news, felt something close to panic, not for himself, but for the human boy he had grown fond of during his visits to the surface, the family in Tokyo who had shared their meal so freely, the farmers in Nairobi who had welcomed his help without suspicion. Commander, Tarn said quietly, finding Kale alone later that night. What happens to them if we attack? What happens to the people who welcomed us? Kale did not answer immediately. He stared out at the glowing planet below, the same planet his ancestor had once retreated from in confusion and fear. I do not know, Tarn, but the Emperor has given his order, and I am still a commander of this empire. Are you? Tarn asked, his voice barely a whisper. Or are you becoming something else? The way Doran and I are becoming something else? Kale turned to look at him sharply, but found no easy answer to give. Meanwhile, on the surface, President Amara Voss received troubling news from her own intelligence sources, carefully gathered through methods she did not fully explain even to her closest advisors. The Thraxian Emperor had issued an ultimatum. 3 days remained before either Kyle acted against Earth or a much larger, much less patient fleet arrived to finish the job without hesitation. Amara called an emergency meeting with world leaders that night, their faces glowing pale in the light of video screens connecting every continent. We knew this might happen, Amara said calmly, though her advisors could see the tension behind her steady voice. Kindness alone was never going to be enough to defeat an empire. It was only ever meant to plant a seed. Now we must trust that the seed has grown deep enough, in enough hearts to matter when it counts most. And if it hasn't? Asked a leader from another nation, his voice tight with worry. If Commander Kale chooses loyalty to his empire over the connections his soldiers have made here? Amara was quiet for a long moment before answering. Then we prepare for a war we hope never to fight, but I do not believe kindness has failed. I believe it is working exactly as it did 6,000 years ago, slowly, quietly, inside the hearts of soldiers who did not expect to be changed. With less than 3 days remaining, tension grew thick both aboard the Thraxian fleet and across the surface of Earth. Soldiers who had grown close to humans during their visits found themselves torn between loyalty to their empire and a growing, uncomfortable affection for people they had been trained their entire lives to see as enemies. Doran, the old soldier who had served for decades without question, found himself standing alone one evening at the edge of the flagship's observation deck, staring down at the Earth below. His mind returned again and again to a moment during his visit to a small farming village. An old human farmer, much like himself in age and weariness, had shared a simple meal with him without any words needed between them. Just quiet company beneath an open sky. Are we really here to destroy them? Doran murmured to himself, the weight of the question settling heavily in his old bones. Lyra, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated with what she saw as dangerous hesitation spreading through the fleet. She began quietly gathering officers still loyal to strict military duty, preparing them for the possibility that Kyle himself might fail to act when the Emperor's deadline arrived. She did not wish to betray her commander, but she also could not allow 6,000 years of Thraxian honor to be lost to what she still believed, deep down, might be an elaborate human trap. Kyle, caught between his ancestors' ancient warning, his growing curiosity about humanity, the Emperor's harsh ultimatum, and the quiet, troubled loyalty of his own changing soldiers, felt the walls closing in around him with each passing hour. 3 days remained, and somewhere far above Earth, a second much larger Thraxian fleet had already begun its journey, carrying a commander who, unlike Kale, would not hesitate, would not question orders, and would not be moved by kindness of any kind. The final day arrived with a strange silence across the fleet. No alarms, no sirens, only a heavy quiet that pressed down on every soldier aboard Kale's flagship. Like the air before a storm, Commander Kale Vex Doran stood alone in his private chamber, the ancient data crystal from his grandfather resting in his palm. He had watched his ancestors' warning so many times over the past days that he no longer needed to play it. He could hear Varan's tired voice in his own mind, word for word. Do not repeat my mistakes. But what were the mistakes truly? Was it retreating without understanding the enemy, or was it never giving kindness a real chance in the first place? Kale did not have an answer, but he had run out of time to find one. A signal blinked on his screen, urgent and red. The second fleet had arrived. Kale rushed to the observation deck, where his officers already stood in stunned silence. Outside the viewport, a new fleet dropped out of warp, twice the size of Kale's own, dark ships stretching across the horizon like a wall of iron. At the front of this new fleet flew a single command ship, larger and more heavily armed than any vessel Kale had ever seen. That is General Threx Morrel's flagship, Lyra said quietly, her voice tight. The Emperor did not bluff. Kale had heard of Threx Morrel before, a commander known across the Empire for swift, merciless conquest, a soldier who had never once hesitated, never once shown mercy, never once questioned an order in his entire long career. He was everything the Emperor wanted Kale to be. A communication request blinked on the main screen. Kale accepted it, and General Threx's face appeared, cold and sharp, his eyes carrying none of the doubt that had grown in Kale's own heart over the past days. Commander Kale, Threx said, his voice flat. The Emperor grew tired of waiting for you to complete a simple task. I am here to finish what you could not. General, Kale replied carefully, the situation on Earth requires patience, not haste, if you attack without understanding. I do not need to understand an enemy to destroy it, Threx interrupted. That is a weakness your ancestor carried, and a weakness you seem to have inherited from him. I will not make the same mistake. My fleet begins bombardment within the hour. You will join us, Commander, or you will be removed from command and dealt with according to Thraxian law. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Kale standing in heavy silence. Word of the ultimatum spread instantly through Kale's ship, and within minutes through the surface of Earth as well. President Amara Voss received the news in her command center, her advisors' faces pale with fear. An hour, one advisor said, his voice shaking. We have 1 hour before a fleet twice the size of the first begins destroying our cities. Amara remained calm, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Then we have 1 hour to trust in what we planted 6,000 years ago. Bring me a direct channel to Commander Kale Vex Doran now. Aboard Kale's flagship, Tarn burst into the command deck, his young face pale with desperation. Commander, we cannot let this happen. The people down there, they trusted us. They fed us. They welcomed us into their homes. We cannot simply stand aside while they are destroyed. Threx hesitated, his weapon still raised but his eyes flickering with sudden uncertainty as he glanced at his own command deck, where several officers stood frozen, unwilling to act against Kale despite direct orders. You cannot win a war against kindness with only fear and force, Kale continued quietly. My ancestor learned this lesson 6,000 years ago and tried to warn us. But instead of understanding his warning, our empire built its plans on pride and old shame. It is time we learned the true lesson instead. For a long, tense moment, Threx said nothing. His weapon still raised, his mind clearly warring between decades of ruthless duty and the undeniable doubt spreading visibly through his own soldiers around him. Finally, slowly, Threx lowered his weapon. "This is not over, Kale," he said quietly, though the fire in his voice had noticeably dimmed. "The Emperor will not accept this." "Perhaps not," Kale replied. "But perhaps in time even the Emperor will come to understand what we have learned here today." With Threx's fleet standing down, the battle above Earth slowly came to an end. Ships that had been locked in fierce combat only minutes before now drifted quietly, their crews uncertain of what came next, but relieved that the destruction had finally stopped. On the surface, cities that had braced for devastating attack instead watched the skies grow calm once more. People who had huddled in shelters slowly emerged, staring upward in disbelief and quiet gratitude. President Amara Voss addressed the world that evening, her voice carrying both exhaustion and hope. 6,000 years ago, our ancestors faced impossible odds and chose unity over fear. Today, that same choice was made once again, not only by us, but by soldiers from a world far beyond our own, who found within themselves something greater than the empire that once created them. We do not know what challenges still lie ahead, but tonight, we celebrate not victory through strength, but victory through understanding, through kindness, and through the simple, powerful truth that connection between people, no matter how different, can change the course of history itself. In the days that followed, Kale's fleet remained in orbit above Earth, no longer as conquerors, but as uncertain allies navigating a new and complicated future. Threx's fleet withdrew slowly back toward Thraxian space, carrying with it seeds of doubt that would soon spread through the wider empire. Doubt about old methods of conquest, doubt about the true cost of pride and vengeance carried across 6,000 years. Kale stood once more on the observation deck of his flagship, staring down at the glowing planet below. Tarn stood beside him, quiet and thoughtful, along with Doran and even Lyra, whose sharp caution had softened, though not disappeared entirely, into something closer to genuine curiosity about the humans she had once viewed only as potential threats. "What happens now, Commander?" Tarn asked quietly. Kale considered the question carefully before answering. "Now, we do what my ancestor could not. We learn, we understand, and perhaps in time, we build something better than conquest ever could have given us." Below them, across the surface of Earth, string lights still glowed softly in town squares. Leftover from feasts prepared in hope rather than fear. Humanity, once again, had faced impossible odds, not with weapons, but with patience, unity, and an unwavering belief that kindness, given freely, might someday change even the most ancient enemy into something entirely unexpected. A friend,